everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
and we'd like to say thank you.
to each and every one of you.
For helping our great nation.
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Elon Musk finally takes control of Twitter, Trevor Noah mocks a racist backlash that never happened, and a politician advises football fans to be a bit less gay. This is Free Speech Nation. Welcome to the show. So it's happened. Elon Musk has finally acquired Twitter. He's changed his Twitter bio to Chief Twit and posted the following simple declaration. The bird is freed. But many people aren't too happy about it. Washington Post columnist Taylor Lorenz claimed that it's like the gates of hell opened on this site tonight. Writing in The Atlantic, Charlie Warzel wrote that there is, both inside and outside the company, an apocalyptic feel to the ordeal. My favourite has got to be from The Independent, that publication that used to be a newspaper and has since turned into an adolescent online blog for soft-witted conformists. And they've run with RIP Twitter, dead at the hands of Elon Musk. Now, in this particular article, the author describes Elon Musk as a right-wing radical, he isn't, by the way, and claims that his takeover of Twitter, quote, will bring nothing but the demise of democracy. Well, at least they're not overreacting. All of these kinds of hysterical responses are pretty much self-satirising, of course, but there's always a meme that captures the moment. Many of Musk's critics have claimed that it's hugely problematic when billionaires have too much power over public discourse, which isn't a bad point, but I can't help but notice that they weren't complaining when the super woke billionaire Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post. The reason they're so upset, of course, is that they don't see Elon Musk as being on their side. In fact, Musk himself has made clear why he wanted to buy the platform. This is what he said. The reason I acquired Twitter is because it is important to the future of civilization to have a common digital town square where a wide range of beliefs can be debated in a healthy manner without resorting to violence. And there you have it. That's why they're so afraid, because disciples of the new religion of critical social justice, colloquially known as wokeness, don't believe in free speech. And for a long time now, Twitter, which like most corporations has been completely captured by this ideology, has been enacting policies that censor points of view that the executives don't agree with. It has deliberately vague terms of service that mean it can delete accounts at will without having to give a reason. It has a chillingly named Trust and Safety Council that decides which opinions are acceptable and which are not. So, if you're a feminist who believes that acknowledging the reality of biological sex is crucial for women's rights, you can find yourself removed from the platform. Not because you've done anything wrong, but because you've indulged in wrongthink. Twitter has also purged satirical accounts that mock the ideological worldview of its staff. The hugely popular account, the Babylon Bee, was locked out for a satirical tweet and was told that it would only be reinstated if they confessed to indulging in hate speech. Well, what they said wasn't hateful, so they refused, and they haven't been able to use the platform ever since. Sometimes Twitter users are punished without even being told what their crimes are, like in Kafka's novel, The Trial. Sometimes the Trust and Safety Council at Twitter has even prevented users from sharing news stories that they don't like. Most famously, the New York Post was locked out of its account for a piece about Hunter Biden's laptop. The contents of the report turned out to be true, but in the run-up to the election, this wasn't really very convenient for Twitter's preferred candidate. But now it's possible that Elon Musk will be rectifying some of these authoritarian policies. Within hours of arriving at Twitter, Musk fired a number of the top executives, including Vijaya Gadde, who was head of legal policy and trust. It was Gadde who made the decision to delete the account of the then sitting president, Donald Trump. And for a long time, activists have been defending Twitter's right to censor content on their platform. The usual refrain is, well, Twitter is a private company. It can do whatever it likes. Well, they're not saying that very much this week, are they? Of course, Twitter isn't real life. It's a cesspit where complicated arguments are reduced to simplistic binaries of good and evil. But the problem is that all of the media and political class are addicted to it. And much of the degraded discourse of Twitter tends to leak out into the real world. So it's important. As Musk pointed out, it has become the de facto public square, and there's no point in having a public square if some voices can't be heard. So the question now is, will Elon Musk be true to his word? Since his acquisition of Twitter, he's posted this. Twitter will be forming a content moderation council with widely diverse viewpoints. No major content decisions or account reinstatements will happen before that council convenes. Well, I'm all for diverse viewpoints, but I'm not so sure a content moderation council is even necessary. Other than the removal of illegal material, surely the block and mute functions are sufficient. Each user can moderate his or her own experience of the platform. When I see someone tweeting something obnoxious or abusive, I just block them. I don't want to see them censored. I just don't want to listen to what they've got to say. And I certainly don't want Silicon Valley tech giants deciding what I can or cannot read. I'd rather not be patronised. The price we pay for free speech is that some terrible people will say terrible things. But at the same time, we can never be sure which of today's heresies won't be the certainties of tomorrow. There are many ideas which were once considered dangerous that we now accept as true. No doubt Galileo or Charles Darwin would have been pronounced guilty of hate speech if such a concept existed in their times. Without freedom of speech, we cannot grow or innovate or develop as a society. It is the bedrock of all of our liberties. Now, Twitter once saw itself as the free speech wing of the free speech party. Well, those days are long gone, and for years now, it has been run by authoritarians who believe that their values should be imposed onto everyone else. It's too early to say whether Elon Musk will successfully restore free speech to the platform, but with all the major social media companies in lockstep in their support of a regressive and illiberal ideology, Musk's intervention can hardly make matters worse. And my studio guests this evening are Scott Capurro and Steve N. Allen. Scott, are you a fan of Elon Musk? Are you happy that he's come to Twitter?
Oh, you know, that whole thing about the kids in the cave, that bothered me.
Oh, yes, fair enough. Yep.
So he said a few things that people found unsavory. I think he's also, well, he's incredibly wealthy, so that makes people trepidatious about him and his intentions.
Yeah.
But I don't think, like you said, I don't think it could get any worse or better. I think it should just be open to him. I think removing Trump was the worst thing they could have done. It gave him much more power amongst an elite group of people that follow him rabidly.
Yeah, I mean, that was interesting, wasn't it? Getting rid of Trump, because he was the sitting president. There is a case to be made that what he has to say is of the public interest, right?
Of course, and he was incredibly powerful. I'm not saying it made him more powerful in general, but amongst those people who fervently cannot get enough of him, suddenly he became, you know, the outsider, you know, the rebel.
Steve. I mean, it did kind of fit into all of those conspiracy theories surrounding Trump, didn't it? It did really help that kind of mindset.
I suppose. Well, I can't remember all the details, but wasn't Trump not using the official President of the United States account? He was doing it all from his own one. So he'd left himself somewhat vulnerable. There's no way they would have banned the POTUS one, would they?
Well, they did, actually. They did lock out the POTUS account as well. And what was interesting about their justification is they were quoting tweets that he'd written, and they were saying things. So, for instance, one of them, he said, "I'm not going to go to the inauguration of the next president." And they said that was a dog whistle to his followers to say that you can go and carry out violence on the day of the inauguration because I won't be there. That's a stretch, right? That's, I mean, that's a huge stretch. It's insane.
I suppose stretches mean that you don't have solid enough evidence. But am I then walking you towards the idea that if there is enough evidence to ban someone for saying something they shouldn't, you then would take that out?
No, I wouldn't do that either. I was just remarking on the absurd logic that they had to resort to in order to justify this idea. I mean, at the very time that they kicked Donald Trump off Twitter, they left up the Supreme Leader of Iran's tweet calling for the wholesale destruction of Israel. Now, I would have thought, now, look, if you're going to apply hate speech laws to a platform, I would say, you know, genocide. Get rid of that, maybe.
It's number 2 or 3 on the list.
Yeah, at least.
Yeah. I mean, I think also marketing yourself as a political platform is a mistake, which it seems they were doing. Yeah. Like you said, it's an open-air market for people just to discuss things. Most people on Twitter are just clowning around, and they really don't even care what...
Well, it'll be interesting to see if the satirical accounts come back, like the Babylon Bee and things like that, because they were clearly joking. Anyway, we're going to get some questions from the audience. We've got a question from Danny. Where's Danny? Hello, Danny.
Hello. My question is about Trevor Noah, of course, St. Trevor of Noah. We've seen his monologue to the masses in the audience. I want to know, did Trevor Noah really say the entire UK is racist? Because we were talking about stretches before. I mean, that's...
I don't know. So Trevor Noah, I don't think he did say the entire UK is racist, actually. He was talking about what he clarified afterwards, and he said... for the people who don't know, he did this sequence on his show in America about this massive backlash against Rishi Sunak becoming Prime Minister, and he talked about all the incredible racist backlash. But of course, it didn't happen. You know, there hasn't been any remarks about Rishi Sunak's race at all, really. So it was a weird kind of, for a comedic routine, it was weird because it was based on absolutely nothing.
He quoted one call-in on a radio show in London that was a bigot.
Well, you say that. The person he quoted, out of context, was actually a Hindu man, a part Indian.
You can still be bigoted.
Yeah, sure, but actually what he said wasn't bigoted, if you heard the full context. So
well, he played the quote, and it sounded pretty...
but like I say, out of context quotes do this, don't they? So there wasn't a backlash, was there, Steve? I mean, there just wasn't. So what? Just on a comedic level, it's a bit weak to do an observational set about something that never happened.
Yes, and then on a logistic level, it's semi-straw man, isn't it? You're pretending the thing you're about to fight against exists in at least a much larger form. Because we can't say there was no backlash in as much as I'm sure there's some WhatsApp group that's got someone saying a thing.
There must be someone somewhere. Of course, And
this is where these arguments always end up going down the same path. So someone will say, some people are saying it, and the response is, the UK is not racist. Now, both of those sentences are true. Some people might be saying stuff in WhatsApp, and the UK is not racist. But unless you acknowledge that your side of this argument doesn't disprove the other one, you just end up shouting at each other.
I wonder if we can we hear what he actually said? Do we have that?
And what I mean by that is this. You hear a lot of the people saying, oh, they're taking over. You know, now the Indians are going to take over Great Britain, and what's next, and what? And I always find myself going, so what?
So it's interesting. I mean, I really haven't heard anyone saying Indians are taking over.
You know,
the UK.
I think he's a funny man, and it would have been funnier and more important if he talked from his own prism, but also if he'd said what really happened, which was the backlash was in the U.S., where everything, including race, is an issue.
It's a much bigger issue there, yes.
And where the President of the United States mispronounced his name and pronounced it, in a way...
Rashid
Sunak, and made it sound as though he was potentially Muslim, which is even more racist because he's Hindu. So that's really the backlash.
Yeah, well, absolutely. You know, if Trevor Noah had said, there's been a racist backlash and it's come from Biden, I think that would have been really funny.
Much funnier.
He's never going to do that because he supports the Democrats, right?
Yeah. In fact, maybe that is the area where he'd actually notice some backlash. He's not in WhatsApp groups of racists in the UK, one would imagine. I mean, that's a poor admissions policy if you've let Trevor Noah.
He's in a bubble in New York, surrounded by incredibly liberal people. That, oh, I heard about this, and so they wrote a comedy sketch about it.
But can you imagine if a Republican president had said what Biden said? I mean, he wouldn't have let that go. That would have been the whole sketch, right? That would have been the whole thing. But I come back to this point, like, I hate that observational comedy when they're observing something that isn't real. And loads of stand-ups do it. It's like, oh, you know when you go to the library, but you can't get to the crime section because there's an inflatable dinghy in the way. You know that? And you get stuff like that, and of course, it's never happened.
Speaking of inflatable...
I actually people did laugh. That's a bit weird.
Speaking of a dinghy, it's why I hated the film Titanic so much.
What? Why?
Because, oh, God, here we go. We talked about this before. Because on the ship were so many interesting stories. The film itself focused on a boring romance between a chubby girl and a guy who looked half her age.
OK, we are slightly deviating from the topic, so let's move on. It's not a film show.
All right.
We'll move on to the next question. This is from Mary. Mary.
Hi.
Hello, Mary.
Should we celebrate the legacy of Jerry Lee Lewis?
Jerry Lee Lewis. And this is it. So obviously rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis passed away this week, age of 87, total pioneer in the rock and roll world, but also had what some people have said is a problematic lifestyle. Now, you know a lot about Jerry Lee Lewis. What do you make of this? Do you think...
Huge fan.
Yeah, huge fan?
Yes, and he, when he was 23, he married his 13-year-old cousin.
And that seems to be the big thing. But he also pulled a gun on Elvis, didn't he?
He did, and his third and fourth wives, they died in mysterious circumstances.
And he shot his bass player in the chest,
yes.
Although that was an accident.
It happens. It happened on a film set recently.
Right, it could have been an accident, maybe.
These things occur. I mean, the cousin thing was not illegal, but it upset a lot of people, and they removed his pop music from pop stations. That's why he decided to go country eventually, because country music people don't care so much about incest. So, apparently, they write songs about it.
Was that legal? She was 13?
At the time, in the 1950s,
really?
It was legal, yes.
Goodness me.
I think the weird thing is that she was his cousin. Although you're Irish, so that's more your thing. But anyway, he was a very controversial, but he was a genius. And bands, you know, as far and wide as the Beatles, so many musicians said on the day he died in his obituary that they owed him their careers, their music, their style. Elton John said thank you to him.
Yeah.
You know, Elvis himself would not have been here.
I mean, people think of a few key songs, but do you think that his legacy is more than that?
I think it was. The album he did in 2010 was incredible.
Really?
All these duets, yeah, with amazing musicians. He's really a genius, and I think his music wouldn't happen now were he young now, doing the kind of things he did now.
So that's a really interesting question, isn't it, Steve? So to what extent do we say that when an artist has behaved badly in whatever way, which might be an understatement in his case, that we can't anymore listen to their music or read their books or watch their films? How far do you go along with that?
I suppose there is a line. It's very easy to imagine there is no line. In this particular case, I think I can hold two thoughts in my head at the same time. I'm a big fan of music that goes tonic, subdominant, dominant, back down again. Whoa, there's your 12-bar. And I'm less in favour of marrying 13-year-olds. It's really easy for me to keep those two things separate.
But you can listen to the song without thinking that you are thereby approving of his behaviour in his own life?
Yeah, almost because, I don't know, if I presume I'm not giving them any money, that can't be it. But it's not, maybe it's not the line for me yet. There are some musical artists that you know, I'm not upset that radio stations don't play Gary Glitter music.
So it's about the quality of the music?
No, it's about... no. Well, that's for checking.
Yeah.
What would you do if Pol Pot released an incredible single that you just absolutely adored? What would you do?
You're right, I'd have to listen to it first.
Right, there we go.
I just downloaded it.
Imelda Marcos singing Feelings is one of the best versions I've ever heard. I start my day with it every day. I can watch a Woody Allen film. I'm not an idiot. I think that their personal life... I don't read Barbra Streisand interviews because she's crazy. and I'm gay, so I have to adore her. You have to ignore the personal lives. You have to ignore an artist. People don't want to know what I do. You don't want to know. So I just feel like that's separate from who they are.
It's interesting, though, isn't it? Because when that Michael Jackson documentary came out, so I haven't heard Michael Jackson played on UK radio ever since. I really haven't. When I went to America, they were playing it everywhere. Still. But they don't care because he's such a loved figure.
And it's considered, if you don't play him, it's considered... It might be considered racist as well.
Really?
Well, he's a huge figure in that community.
Yeah, it's a fascinating topic, though. But we've even heard it with Morrissey as well. A lot of people won't listen to Morrissey anymore because they disapprove of his...
Makes my fillings fall out, that stuff.
Right, we're going to move on to another question. This one's from John. Hello, John.
Good evening, good evening. Will you be buying the new book about Liz Truss?
Yes, I will. And this is a book by James Heal, who wrote a really great article about this in The Spectator this week, because he wrote this book about Liz Truss. There it is, Out of the Blue. And this was obviously written before he knew what was going to happen. The subtitle of that book, he changed. The subtitle was The Inside Story of Liz Truss and Her Astonishing Rise to Power. And they rapidly changed it to The Unexpected Rise and Rapid Fall of Liz Truss. He even wrote a new epilogue for the book and made some changes, and it was a very funny article that he wrote about this. But, you know, how unfortunate to have this book ready to go just at this moment.
I know, it's terrible. Imagine if you'd written your first book and then people, the woke community has burst into a ball of flames.
And they've all gone away.
Yeah.
Do you know what? I would be happy with that.
Really?
I'd be fine with that. I would take the hit.
You're sacrificial, you are.
Yeah.
I think that she is still an interesting figure and worth hearing about. She's still in politics, and she's been around for 12 years at that point. And a lot of what I'd read about the book states that it kind of predicts what her behavior might have been. And
Yes.
Even though she hadn't yet, it predicted her downfall.
Well, there is that. There's it's still an astonishing career, and she still was the third female prime minister. That's not too shabby.
And the shortest serving, so that's a fact. That's a Wikipedia thing.
Yeah.
So who wouldn't buy that book? I mean, I think from reading the article, it seems like the lesson that we should learn from Liz Truss is that, you know, people say if you believe in yourself, you can do anything. No, you need more than just believing in yourself. It seems like she had lots of that.
Yes.
But now we have evidence that that's not enough.
One of the things that James Hill talks about in the book, which I found really interesting, is that apparently people who know her understand that she's actually incredibly charismatic, funny, intelligent, and that the camera kind of takes her personality away.
Yeah.
She sort of freezes. And I thought that was really interesting to see that.
Yeah, there's a lot of people in our business, in comedy, that find that when they go to do their act on camera, it just doesn't transfer. It's just, there's a certain glint in the eye of a performer or a politician you can notice where they can embrace the camera, and some people just can't. When you said the shortest serving, for a minute I thought you meant that she was the most diminutive, and I thought, is she tiny? But
no,
yeah,
that's Rishi.
No, that is Rishi. well, anyway, Out of the Blue, that's a book by James Hill and Harry Cole. I'm gonna read that. I think it could be fascinating. We're going to move on to another question if we have one. Do we have another question? And Andrea?
Yeah.
Hello.
Hi. Is Ray Fiennes right to defend JK Rowling?
Is Ray Fiennes right to defend JK Rowling? So we've obviously discussed this issue a lot before in terms of JK Rowling's views on women's rights. And actually, the failure of a number of Harry Potter actors to defend her. Not only that, some of them have gone on the attack, haven't they, implicitly or otherwise. This week, Ray Fiennes has sort of stated that he's defended her, that he said the verbal abuse directed at her is disgusting. It's appalling. It's not some obscene uber right-wing fascist. It's just a woman saying, I'm a woman and I feel I'm a woman and I want to be able to say that I'm a woman. And it's interesting, isn't it, that people are so reluctant to say, let's just start by saying the abuse and death threats and rape threats are wrong. Yeah. Why is that so difficult to say?
It's just the same old misogyny, isn't it? It's just, it's not taking her to word or even reading what she has said. And I've looked again and again and again, and I cannot find anything that she said that's anti-trans.
No, or hateful in any way. It's just not there.
Her statement that she put out, there were some moments reading that to myself. I've read it many, many times. A few moments where I thought, that's a bit sharp. But again, it's just her opinion. It's not going to hurt anyone. It's just her experience.
And it's certainly not hateful. I mean, she's very explicit about her support for trans people. It's a very weird one. But why is it, Steve, do you think that, you know, we've had Daniel Radcliffe, Rupert Grint, Emma Watson, all kind of sticking the knife in a little bit when it comes to JK Rowling. But Draco Malfoy, what's his name, Tom Felton, and now Ray Fiennes, who was Voldemort. So is it the villains that are the good guys? Is that what it is?
You're onto something.
Yeah.
Yeah. We should look into who was the guy who played the dog. I can never work out whether he was a good guy or a bad guy.
Was this the Cerberus dog?
I mean, I didn't read enough of these things. To be fair, I don't have a lot of skin in this game. I've not really watched all the films either.
But should it take... I mean, it seems almost as courage for someone like Ray Fiennes to say the obvious, which is rape threats are bad.
No, but I think there is courage involved in that, because everyone should be able to say, regardless of whether you think she was too sharp in what she said, just even if you thoroughly disagree with the passion about what she said, you shouldn't then think it's OK to have violence threats, rape threats, death threats. Of course, they're so easy to separate out in your brain. I don't understand why people struggle with this. But because you know it happens, then I wouldn't be surprised if people's agents aren't saying, well, maybe you don't want to defend this, but you don't die on this.
I think that's happening
quite a lot. But people I've read about who take her remarks really seriously and react badly, a lot of these people I read about, they grew up with her books and her films.
Yes.
And they connect a part of their childhood with her work, and they feel somehow betrayed.
Yes, but again, it comes back to what you said before. They never can quote what she said that's upset them. Right. It's like they don't know. They've just almost been told, they've been caught up in this hysteria where they have to believe this thing.
They think that she knew them and agreed with them. And when you don't, then you feel like you've been left out
No, but even if you feel betrayed, don't issue a death threat.
Yeah, I mean, there is that. I think that's a fair basic point.
I forgot to say people are nuts.
And people are nuts.
Yeah.
Anyway, after the break on Free Speech Nation, should the Elgin marbles stay in the British Museum or be returned to Greece? I'm going to be joined by a pair of experts to debate the issue. See you shortly.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, you know.
We're on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week. I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio
and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation. Could we be moving closer to solving the long-running debate about where the Elgin marbles should be homed? They were brought to Britain from Greece by Lord Elgin in the 19th century, but many people think the time has come for them to be returned. And John Lefas, a rich Greek businessman, is going to invest millions in a campaign to lobby MPs and try to get the marbles and other ancient artworks to return to their former homes. So joining me now to debate this issue, I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Tessa Dunlop, the historian, writer and broadcaster, and the archaeologist Mario Trabucco della Torretta. So, Dr. Dunlop, I'm going to come to you first. Can you give us some background for those who don't know? How is it that these marbles from the Parthenon ended up in Britain?
Well, first of all, you erroneously referred to them as the Elgin marbles. Now, and if you want to be bang on trend, Andrew, they are actually Parthenon marbles.
Yeah, I did it to annoy you.
Yeah, I know. I'm sure you did do it to me. And Elgin, of course, there still is the Lord Elgin. I think we're on to the 9th or 10th Elgin now. But he was a soldier and a diplomat, propping up the great power that was Britain in the early 19th century with our chums, the Ottomans.
Yes.
And he was apparently, although it's contested historically, given permission to save vast, huge amounts of marble. I mean, hundreds of feet knocked off the Parthenon, doing yet more damage. His claim was he was saving these extraordinary 2.5 millennial-old artefacts, some of the finest. That's uncontested. This is the finest, classical art in the whole wide world. He dumped it in boats, brought it over to Britain, apparently to look after it and so everyone could see it. Well, he stuck it in his own private collection until, of course, he went bankrupt. I think he had a dirty divorce. Men like this tend to. And anyway, in the end, the British government bought them off him and they were put in the museum for all the world to see. We managed to clean them very badly in the 1930s, scratched them. But hey, don't worry, we were keeping them away from the perfidious Greeks, who by this time had wriggled free of the Ottomans and have woken up increasingly in the 20th century and thought, we want our marbles back.
Now,
thank you very much.
I'm going to come over to Maria Trabucco. What do you make of that argument that, this was effectively someone pilfering something that just did not belong to them?
First of all, the problem is they did belong to the Ottomans, because the Ottomans were the lawful owners of all the Ottoman Empire. And Greece was a part of the Ottoman Empire just in the same way as Wales is part of the British Empire, or was part of the British Empire. So it was an integral part of their territory. So because of these, we cannot say that they were outside of the scope of the power of the Ottoman Empire.
You don't suggest that you say he had permission, effectively.
Yes, he did.
It's contested, isn't it, historically?
It's accurate, and it actually is corroborated by analysis from Ottoman history experts, for example.
Actually, they've struggled to find the precise document in the otherwise extensive Ottoman archives.
Document.
But moving on from that, you wouldn't contest that these Parthenon marbles are the soul of Greece. I mean, they belong there. There is a beautiful museum that's been erected there, the Acropolis Museum, in 2009. There is a whole gaping parts of the museum waiting for these marbles to be returned.
It's very interesting in the Acropolis Museum, if you go around there. I mean, it's particularly well situated because you can see the Parthenon directly opposite. And you can see the gaps in the marbles where they are, and it says where they are, and a lot of them are in the British Museum. So would you accept this argument that just aesthetically they belong back where they were created?
Aesthetically, he is only part of the answer at the end of the day, because the problem is they are an historical monument. They are part, they witnessed the heyday of a civilization. So they are not just a work of art. In a way, if you look at them just as a work of art, you commit an even greater crime than breaking them apart.
Do you accept, Tessa Dunlop, that I know you mentioned the scratching and the cleaning in the 1930s. There have been experts who have said quite clearly that had they been left at the Acropolis, they would have been degraded by now.
I agree, Andrew.
Yes.
And what we can do is we can package this so beautifully. We can say, we've looked after these for you, Greece. And just in a classy act of unprecedented returnism.
So you don't dispute that there's a point there?
No, I think that we have looked after them well, and we can spin that to make so-called global Brexit Britain look generous. We are world leaders, and we're going to bestow back to you, European Greece, these founding stones of yours and our heritage.
But how far do you go with this? Because there are museums all over the world that have various items that have been pilfered from all sorts of civilizations.
That is not an argument to deny Greece the most world-famous UNESCO site. This is the heart of democracy. You can experience these marbles 2,500 years on where they were first created. It makes me almost cry. I refuse to go and visit them in the British Museum. I think it's disgusting. And I tell you what, I wonder what your audience think, because while the British establishment, left and right, the Tristan Hunts and the Woolly Liberals and the Neil McGregors, they make money from it just like David Cameron and Boris Johnson go, no, returnism. They're all the same piggies in the trough. But if you ask the decent British public what they think, I wonder if, are we allowed to do a poll in your audience?
Let's not do that. I might do it at the end. We're going to come to you, Mario, first. What do you make of this argument, though? I mean, very passionately delivered, and she has a point.
Absolutely. The problem is we wouldn't do what Elgin has done 200 years ago today. We definitely wouldn't. Who would? The problem is, back then, the sensibility was simply different. The Ottomans themselves, they simply didn't value the items in the same way as we do.
If you acknowledge that we now would not do what Lord Elgin did back then, is not the logical extension of that? Well, then, we should return the marbles.
No.
Try and undo that crime.
No, because by doing that, first of all, it's not a crime. And second of all, we basically would be rewinding the clocks of history, which is something that you don't do. History has a dignity in all its face.
So this idea of the marbles being in the British Museum as a kind of testimony to, well, I suppose, the criminal acts of a former generation. Is that not something that is not historical? I mean, OK, fine, Mario says it's not criminal, that's contested.
Okay. Now you're sounding like the puppet of Neil McGregor, who goes, this is, world museum, a museum for the world, suggesting that within the European Union of Freedom of Movement, suggesting that the Acropolis Museum isn't somehow a museum for the world. It's certainly more of a museum for Europeans than Britain is these days.
Well, that's not a point I was making. I mean, I think that the Acropolis...
Did I misunderstand you, Andrew?
Yes. I was talking about... Well, I wasn't saying that the British Museum is the only museum that people can possibly go to. I've been to the Acropolis Museum. I think... and in fact, if I'm going to lay my cards on the table, I agree with you. I think they should go back. But it's
a beautiful moment.
But it's interesting that you're interpreting it as a... I'm trying to tease out your views on this and whether you can see the other side.
I certainly can see the other side. And one of the great fears, of course, for all our establishment arts and culture boys, mainly boys, in Britain is that, you let one thread go, there'll be the unravelling of what happens to the Benin bronzes, and people in Berlin are worried, what about the Nefertiti bust? There's lots.
But there is a point there, isn't there?
There's all sort of establishment opinion. That's why Mary Beard, famous classicist, sits on the fence. She must be getting quite uncomfortable.
OK, but what about the British Museum in of itself? I mean, the British Museum has collections from all sorts of civilisations across the globe. And surely it does set a precedent if they return the Parthenon marbles.
The thing about the Parthenon marbles is they take up a whole wing that was built specifically for them in the British Museum. We now live in the era where we don't want to go and see artefacts in glass cages or cases anymore. We want an immersive experience, an experiential one. You can't get more immersive than these marble friezes being returned to Athens, to the hill of the Acropolis Hill.
Mario, how do you think people in Greece feel about this? Is there an overwhelming consensus there?
There is definitely a strong feeling, but it's not, despite being dominant, is not 100%. There are Greeks, actually, that say, no, you know what, there are historical reasons why this happened.
How many?
We didn't
2%?
There is a percentage.
So there's a debate going on.
There is a debate. There is also a debate. The problem is you cannot put on one side the argument of tourism. We want to give them the experience. We want to give them the love and then the emotional aspect of it. And on the other side, put what was history, what can we learn from it?
Yes.
At the end of the day, it's an historical fact. The Elgin marbles came in this country, brought by Lord Elgin for a reason, to educate the taste and the sensibility of the Britons on what actually was the classical civilization of Athens, and he succeeded in this because they've had a powerful influence on the pivotal moment when they abandoned neoclassicism as an idealized version of an antiquity that was basically fake, and they actually said, you know what, actually, realism and what they really were is something that we should privilege now.
Yes.
Archaeology as a science basically is born on that day. And the influence is powerful not only on architecture, for example. You go all around London. You go on Regent Street, for example, or you go on Hyde Park Corner.
Yes.
You go on St Pancras Church. These marbles have a palpable influence.
Lucky us. We've had them for...
Absolutely. But also in literature. Mary Shelley, Frankenstein comes from that.
Tessa, because, I mean, I think he makes a point. He says, I am less concerned about trying to undo some injustice in the past. All of those people are dead. I don't care about that. What I'm interested in is the aesthetics of it, actually. I'm interested in the fact that I think with those marbles in the Acropolis Museum, the impact artistically would be more important, I think.
I agree, but we can't pretend it's not political as well, because it is. What I want to let you all know, I mean, you might be across this, but for the first time ever, we lent one of those, because British Museum fames itself, prides itself, we lend to other world museums more than any other museum.
Yes.
We lent a river god, a statue from this collection for the first time ever in 2015. Guess which country we lent it to?
I don't know.
In 2015, 1 year after the annexation of Crimea, we lent a Parthenon marble to Russia, to Putin's Russia. Are you telling me that we can argue we're fitter than the Greeks to look after these marbles?
Come back
At the end of the day, the Russians have asked for it before the Crimean annexation, and it was a long-standing partnership between the two institutions, the British Museum and the Hermitage. And the British Museum has always said, ask for it and we'll lend them. But obviously, when you lend something, you have a reasonable expectation that you are going to get it back.
Why do you think that this particular issue has been so contested? For many, many years now, there have been books written about this. You know, this is a particularly hot topic, isn't it?
So it all starts with the resurgence of the Greeks, basically, and their liberation from the Ottomans.
Yes.
What happens then is they are a dispersed people, and they need to start coalescing towards something, towards an ideal. And this ideal was, we basically are not Turks. We are not part of the empire anymore. We are actually Greeks. So we need to recuperate all that was Greek, all that was the idealized version fed to them by the Germans.
So you're saying it is partly political, partly nationalistic?
It is, absolutely. It is the birth of the nationalistic myth 20 years after the facts actually happened.
We don't have much time, Tessa. Do you want one
I just
final
want to
word?
ask, how would you feel Stonehenge, one of the stones, being removed from that monument by the Greeks when the English were having a little civil war, and us now saying, oh, look, we're democratic, could we have it back? And the Greeks saying no. How would that make us look? It would be such a classy political move to give them back. It would make Britain look bigger than it is.
Unfortunately, we are out of time. One final word from you, Mario. Why is that not classy?
It's not classy because it was all said and done, and after the events, you cannot just go back to people and say, you know what, I now I've changed my mind, I want them back, when they were lawfully acquired, and since then there is a campaign of slander and image destruction of Lord Elgin 200 years since.
Well, we're not going to resolve this tonight, but thank you both for your very passionate input on that. Dr. Tessa and Mario, thank you. After the break on Free Speech Nation, we're going to be meeting the teacher who's trying to get members of Generation Z to respect opposing opinions and engage in debates about contentious topics. Mission impossible? We're going to find out in a couple of minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today.
I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory.
twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for the Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back. Later in the show, I'm going to be turning agony uncle with the help of my wonderful panel, Scott Capurro and Steve N. Allen. And we're going to help you to deal with your unfiltered dilemmas. So if you've got any problems at all, personal or otherwise, email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk and we will do our level best to answer your issues and solve your life. Anyway, are Gen Z bad at arguing? Well, some schools and universities are now teaching young people how to disagree respectfully. Classes will encourage students to actively listen to others and avoid argumentative responses in an effort to promote free speech and prevent conversations around controversial subjects simply being shut down. To discuss this, I'm delighted to welcome Samantha Price, head teacher at Benenden School in Kent. Thank you for joining me today. So, Samantha Price, can you tell me a little bit about why it is that there is a perception that younger people find it difficult to disagree politely?
I think young people have always found disagreeing challenging, and I certainly remember back to my own teenage years when I had sort of very strong convictions about things, and finding the right words or the right way to disagree was a challenge. I think with the generation that we're working with now, what makes it so complicated is that they have every possible access to being able to communicate very, very instantaneously, particularly across social media. So if they've got a thought, they can get it out there quickly into sort of a black hole on social media platforms. If they see something that they don't like, they can have immediate response, and there's no real accountability to that. So it's very easy for them to be able to just form an opinion based on very little knowledge and just be able to react very quickly indeed. And of course, I think that makes it hard for them to really get their point across, but actually to be able to make progress with that as well.
Now, I know I used to be a teacher myself, so I know a lot of school teachers, and they tell me that things are getting worse, and there is a sense in which there are just certain opinions that young people will not accept. But of course, young people haven't been able to formulate those opinions themselves. They must be getting that from somewhere. Isn't it really a problem of older people imposing values onto the young?
Well, I think, again, social media, I'm afraid, is predominantly to blame for this, albeit social media can also be incredibly informative. And having sort of experienced lockdown, and for many of young people being literally locked in their houses for months on end, social media platforms were the only way in which they could sort of have access to the external world and various views. And we all know that 2 years ago, when we were locked down, there were a lot of very contentious issues which came out. And of course, those are the issues which were very pertinent to this generation, and they wanted to have their voice heard. I think the real challenge for them, as you say, is that they've got to have enough information to be able to substantiate what their response actually is. And too quickly, they just sort of ride on an emotional response without being able to actually sort of argue it and effectively listen to what differing views might be. And from our point of view as educators and working with young people in schools, now that we've got them properly back in, I think we've got a lot of work to do to be able to challenge the good intentions, the genuinely good intentions that they've got in terms of wanting to really advocate for real equality in society and, of course, climate change and so many other issues. But until they learn to effectively listen to each other and listen to opposing views, they're not going to be in a position, I don't think, to be able to make a real difference. And that's a difference I think they actually can make as they grow into adulthood.
Do you think a lot of it is also to do with popularity, people, young people not wanting to say the thing that other people don't agree with? I mean, how do pupils at your school who sort of dare to disagree with the consensus, how do they get on? Do they feel intimidated by that?
I think generally young people, they form an opinion through social media, through what their friends say and other influencers. And I think at the time when they are reacting to that, they genuinely believe that that is their opinion. I don't think that they feel that they are frightened to be able to say what they really think, because I think the problem is with social media, everything happens so quickly. You almost don't have time to be able to sit back and to reflect on what it is you truly believe in. So I think that's the real issue. And of course, when the students are in school, you've got that time. And I think as educators, we need to create that time in our timetables to enable them to be able to do that, so that they're not quite so reactive.
Can I ask how, on a practical level, how you are going about achieving that in the school?
So one of the things that we did to launch this academic year, which was something that I started to work on with the Girls' Schools Association when I was president last year, was to spend a day with our upper sixth pupils, just all year 13, just focusing on this topic of disagreeing well. And we invited other schools to come into our school. And we worked on this in collaboration with students from UCL. So they're ambassadors for exactly what it is that we are trying to achieve. And what was fantastic about having UCL there was that you've got young people in their early 20s, and they were running workshops with our students and the other students who came in from other schools. And their influence and them sitting down with our 18-year-olds and explaining to them the importance of being able to listen with empathy, with being able to step back and to think about the words that you're using, was incredibly powerful. In many ways, it was much more powerful than teachers actually taking the lead on this. So that was the focus of the day. We also had Michelle Hussein, who came in or spoke to us remotely, really about how she challenges sort of key figureheads and politicians on radio, and she's always looking for the light rather than the sort of the dark side of an argument. So the way she questions is to manage the truth, but always looking for a way forward in those debates. And that was a really powerful message that she gave the students, is that it's right to have an opinion. We want you to have opinions. We recognise that everybody's going to disagree, and actually that's healthy too, or else we can't move society forwards. But in disagreeing, we've got to find a way through, and of course that light is that way through. What I was really delighted about at the end of that day was that we had so many students from other schools as well as my own saying that was one of the best days that they can remember, particularly when they've sort of taken time out of lessons to focus on that topic. And what's been interesting around school is that with them being the top year group, they use that term now regularly. We've got to disagree well, and that filters down through the rest of the school. But I mean, through our PSHE programme, we've also put a lot of focus on this too.
But it's not just about being polite, though, is it, and arguing well? It's also about analysing your own thought process and acknowledging that all of us are likely to be wrong about a lot of things. I mean, isn't part of the problem here that critical thinking isn't really being developed sufficiently in schools?
Yeah, and I think critical thinking is, there used to be a critical thinking A-level actually, which went by the way a number of years ago now, and critical thinking therefore has to be taught through the curriculum, across the curriculum, with a specific focus in some of your co-curricular sort of academic and non-academic subjects that you teach. And I would very, very strongly advocate that that is something that all schools need to be really focusing on. And in being sort of critical in your thinking, you also need to be critical in how you listen to people, and you need to actively listen to people, not just listen to what it is that you want to hear. And you've got to be able to breathe and pause before you then sort of form your own argument. One of the exercises that the UCL ambassadors ran was actually that they got the students to look in each other's eyes. A lot of them hadn't met before because it was different schools. They had to look in each other's eyes for a minute, which is a really, really difficult thing to do at the best of times. And they couldn't speak to each other at all. They just had to sort of make a connection with that person. And what was interesting is once you make a connection with anybody and you actually look at them, then actually that takes the sting out of a sort of different views that you both might have, because there's a human connection. And the problem, of course, with social media is there is no human connection. So the students found that really fascinating. And then they had to listen to opposing views of each other, and they had to listen for a minute again without interrupting. Now, when you feel passionately about something, listening to someone else with a differing view for a minute is actually a very difficult thing to do. But what was interesting is that as they listened for a minute, that also gave them a minute to begin to sort of gather their own thoughts. So what you get is a slightly sort of less emotional response, and you get something that is more thought through. Of course, this takes time, and it's something we've got to do with young people sort of right their way through school.
Well, I think everything you're doing there sounds absolutely wonderful. Good luck with it. Thank you for joining us, Samantha Price.
Thank you.
So, I mean, I think young people get a lot of stick these days about not being able to agree or disagree well, and to, constantly just narrowing the Overton window.
Thank you.
Are we just being unfair about young people?
Yeah, definitely, because all of the things that she said were true, not just of Gen Z. It happens through all the age groups, especially on social media. You're right. If you want to see someone not fully listen and just go back with their argument, have a little look at Twitter.
Yeah.
The same thing happens, that people don't listen because they don't want to be proved wrong. There's a cost to the emotional climate.
Yeah, so that's interesting, isn't it? It's almost as though your opinion becomes part of your identity. So if you're proven wrong, that's somehow a threat to your sense of self or something.
You should just drop dead.
Right.
But I think critical theory it's not great. We should discourage it in schools, I think. We'd all be dead. Because if people were critically theoretic, they wouldn't have got the vax, and we would have all died.
So you don't think people should be thinking independently?
No, we're all sheep. And we should be thinking that way.
For goodness sake, Scott.
Otherwise, we're not going to survive. We all rely on one another.
You do realise that all of the major innovations that have occurred throughout human history have come about by critical thinking.
And look where we're at.
I'm going to turn away from him for now. He's been cantankerous for no good reason. But I mean, I've been to speak on university campuses, and I kind of think it's good to hear Samantha Price talking about this happening in schools. Because even last week, we had this talk at Gonville and Keys, which was Helen Joyce was giving a talk. And people were standing outside banging pots and pans and trying to drown it out. And this is a respected journalist. This isn't some hateful monster. I mean, this is insane, right?
Yeah, but also at the same time, it's depressing to hear that this is taught in schools, because the fact that we have to be taught how to argue without just being overwhelmed by our own emotions. I mean, I'm harsh on this. I think if you can't control your emotions, you shouldn't be allowed out the front door. You're a problem in society if you can't...
He's talking about you, Scott.
Well, I'm not allowed out the front door.
No, that's true. You're a very militant husband.
They brought me here in a tunnel. But also, I do understand the need to critically argue. I do. And I think it's great that we can all disagree. We live in a free society, basically.
Yeah,
and,
almost.
Right. I think the problem is people are feeding too much sugar to kids and they forget how to behave.
You think so?
That's what it is.
Okay.
They're monsters, they're meatloafs. And during the pandemic, I saw people out with the children a lot, and it's just, they're handing you their kids like, please take them, please. We've had them indoors all day long. And I don't know how to behave with children, what to say to them. They're really difficult.
They are difficult. This is why I gave up teaching.
Yeah.
I mean, they're really, really hard to deal with. So actually teaching them to be polite.
You cannot hit them.
You absolutely cannot.
Right? You're not supposed to, right?
Scott, after the break, we'll be getting some questions from people who've been watching the show tonight. Please do not go anywhere.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
Hello, I'm Alastair Stewart, and I'd invite you to join me at noon on Saturdays and Sundays for Alastair Stewart and Friends. I've been in this business for over 40 years. Now, here at GB News, I've never been happier. I get to choose the big stories that really interest me. We hear what you have to say, and you hear what I have to say. I really hope you can join me, noon on Saturdays and Sundays.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me at 11 on GB News for Headliners, in which I'll be joined by two of the UK's top comedians discussing tomorrow's papers. If it's an important story, we'll cover it, but we'll have some fun along the way. Headliners, the late-night paper review that won't send you to sleep like the others will. 7 nights a week at 11 p.m. on GB News.
Hi there, it's Stephen and Anne.
At breakfast from 6 a.m, you'll always be caught up with everything you need to know, the latest headlines, opinions and debates.
We'll bring you the good news and the bad, but most of all, we're here for you.
Remember, send in your views and let us know what you would like us to talk about.
That's because we're your news channel. And every morning at 6 a.m, it's breakfast on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, my Mark Meets guest is one of the most influential Conservative politicians of his generation, former Tory MP Sir Alan Duncan, who served under Theresa May, David Cameron and Michael Howard. In the big question, can Rishi Sunak make a success of Brexit? We'll hear from former Northern Ireland First Minister Arlene Foster and Labour's Barry Gardiner. And in my big opinion, as the Daily Telegraph report lockdown impacts are now killing more people than COVID, it's the biggest I told you so in history. Never again. We're live at 9.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Right, we have a lovely, wonderful studio audience here, and we don't want to let them go to waste. Let's get some more questions. Our first question in this section is from Christopher. Where is Christopher?
Hello.
Hello, Christopher.
Hello. If you are a gay football fan, should you compromise and go to the World Cup to Qatar?
Well, this is an interesting one because you will have seen this story about Foreign Secretary James Cleverly. He was criticised this week because he suggested that gay fans who are going to Qatar, because, by the way, as you will know, Qatar don't have a great record on gay rights. I think it's illegal. I think they have the death penalty, don't they? Basically, James Cleverly has said that people should be respectful of the host nation and show flex and compromise. In other words, don't hold hands, I guess. It's funny because the Metro reported this, and their headline was James cleverly says, don't try to be less gay, which he didn't say. I think that was an unfair kind of thing. You know?
Yeah, but I still disagree with the original point. It does seem a little bit like giving in on something that could be the best time to protest. Because this is, for all of their back history of not having a great track record with gay rights, they're not going to do anything now. They want to try and sports wash the nation. They want to try and look like they're good. So you arrest a couple for holding hands, that's it. You've just wasted billions to make yourself look worse.
What about, aren't you a cultural relativist? Don't you say, well, that's their rules, that's their culture, their way of life? Is that not fair enough?
Well, if that's the way you want to view it, don't go.
Right.
But don't turn up there and hide and be like, oh, no, I don't want. I'm going to stick to these rules, which, no, there are different rules, as in, like, I don't jaywalk in countries where that's illegal, but not respecting someone's right to have a sexuality is a bit different to just sticking to the rules.
Yeah, well, I mean, I went to Dubai relatively recently, and it's illegal there as well, but you don't get the death penalty if you're gay and a foreigner, you just get exiled. I think it's just for the locals.
Yeah,
so that was reassuring.
Yeah, that is good.
Yeah.
And I bet the sex was great. But I've been to Qatar, actually.
Yeah.
And I was raised in San Francisco, and Qatar was too gay for me. Way too gay. Like, guys following you on the street on camels. It's like, how can you compete? They walk up and they wink at you. You want to ride? I'm like, I guess. And then, you know, hairdressers following you back to the hotel room.
Okay, but isn't it?
It's because I'm hot, but also it's because the rules are so severe that people act out.
Yes.
But also, they're just rules actually for foreigners, not for locals. I think it's just to present themselves as a proper Islamic nation, when actually the truth is it's a country run by men where men do exactly what they want, and a lot of men can't go near women until they're a certain age. So in the meantime, let the good times roll.
Well, okay. Well,
right?
I would
seriously.
But I'm interested in this. Like,
gay.
in Qatar, though, I mean, we do have this issue, don't we? That we have lots of protests within this country about footballers wearing rainbow laces and corporations smearing their restaurants and high street shops with those gaudy rainbow flags every Pride Month. But it doesn't matter here, because we've got equal rights for gay people. It doesn't do anything. Why don't they do it in Dubai? Why don't they do it in Qatar?
There have been some protests, but the bigger protests would have been not taking place in this from the beginning. It's a little too late to be having the protest now. Why were we agreeing to, even as a nation, take part or even hold the event there?
Well, there's that.
I mean, money is the answer. I know the answer's money.
But don't you think the England football team, are they in this one? They'll be in this one,
You know, I'm the same with you on
I have no idea.
I don't know.
But don't you think it'd be great if they just turned up with the gay rainbow uniforms and they did YMCA? You know, just as they blew the whistle. I mean,
that would make every football game better.
It would.
I'd watch that. Yeah.
Don't you think that they should be protesting in places where it's illegal? And not, you know, they make such an effort of it in this country, and it doesn't achieve anything.
Yeah, I think, you know, the thing is, it could be seen as quite offensive, actually, to go to a host nation and then tell them how to behave.
Well, that's the debate, isn't it? That was what James Cleverly was really trying to say, wasn't it?
Yes, it is. And he really stumbled on it. It was quite awkward, and he shouldn't have said anything, actually, unless it was scripted.
It was probably well-intentioned, I think.
Hard to say with that party, but in the meantime, what I think is, you know, don't, like what you just said, if you disagree with their policies and their politics, just don't go watch it on TV. I'm not going to watch it because of the 6,500 migrants who died building that stadium. That, to me, seems a more important point.
Exactly. I mean, that's a major issue, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why are people not protesting that?
Yeah.
You know?
Because, you know, the gays can go pretty much wherever they want. If this one little place you feel uncomfortable in, then, I don't know, go to Tokyo. They're fantastic in Tokyo. And they love tall people with light-coloured eyes. Take my word for it.
Let's move on to another question. Who have we got now? Chaz? Chaz? Oh, no, Chaz has emailed in. He's not here tonight.
Oh, right.
We don't like Chaz. So Chaz has said the following. He said, do you agree with Bob Geldof that criticism of celebrity do-gooders has gone too far? So Bob Geldof, who you'll know, he's obviously famous for his charity campaigning, but this week he spoke out about criticism that other celebrities have been subjected to when they're trying to raise money for famine relief. And the example he gave was the broadcaster Stacey Dooley, who was branded a white saviour by Labour MPs when she campaigned for comic relief in Uganda. And Geldof thinks that such remarks are, quote, trite and silly and a wormhole people have disappeared down. It did seem odd. I remember that with Stacey Dooley and people saying, oh, you know, she's going to help these people in Africa. She's a white saviour. That's a racist act. I mean, I'm sure the people who were getting the food and provisions were probably not throwing it back in her face saying, be off with you, white saviour.
Yeah.
Don't.
I think the closest thing to a real issue would be the way in which, like, someone's done the psychology and they know that if you want people to give money, you put forward an image that looks terrible.
Yes.
That's why the pitch on the side of charity boxes is there to bring up emotion. So people film something specifically finding the saddest looking baby you can find, and then you send Stacey Dooley in. Now, there is a distastefulness to that. I don't think colour's anything to do with it. It's just the way that charity works these days. Find the worst looking picture, which then will be patronising.
But why does it have to become about race when people are trying to do a good thing? Why degrade it in that
I agree.
way?
And Geldof went on to say in that statement, really interesting, he said, if I see there's a problem, I try to jump in and solve it. And that's not about my skin colour or theirs, or my race or theirs, which I know...
What is the implication? Are people basically trying to say that if he goes out of his way to help these people in foreign countries, it's patronising or something? Is that what they mean?
I think so, and I think he's still angry because people blame him for Brexit. Because of that...
Oh, the what thing?
The fish thing.
Yeah.
What, being on, the way he was chasing...
On the boat,
He was shouting at fishermen through a megaphone.
And people hated that in this country so much. Like, how dare you shout at a working person?
Well, it does...
Leave them off your list.
But again, going back to what Steve was saying about PR, a multi-millionaire screaming about privilege to a bunch of working class people, that's the problem.
Right.
It is, but then the counter-argument to that would be, so no one with a... What value of money is it that you're not allowed to have an opinion?
Oh, I think millionaires just shut up.
Yeah.
Oh, right, so at least you've got a number.
And celebrities, full
Does
stop,
that change with inflation?
No, just all of them.
Or produce a decent song more often than every 30 years.
I know, exactly. I mean, Boomtown Rats did that one about Mondays. That was all right, wasn't it?
That was okay, yeah.
I think you're thinking of the Bangles.
Yeah.
Oh, was that the Bangles?
Yeah.
No, that was Walk Like an Egyptian, which is a terribly racist song. Anyway, we're going to move on to now. We've got another question from Angela. This is also coming on email. Angela asks, should Anjem Chowdhury be allowed back on Twitter? So apparently, Anjem Chowdhury, you'll know from his work, a controversial Islamic preacher, he's apparently returned to Twitter, and this has coincided with Elon Musk's taking over of Twitter. I don't think this is why Elon Musk took over Twitter, because Chowdhury's not a nice guy. He was sentenced to 5.5 years in prison for inciting support of ISIS. So when we talk about free speech, and I said earlier in the show, if we believe in free speech, we have to believe in it for unpleasant people as well. Doesn't that apply here?
I, in a second, would love to find out your take on it, because I'm for banning.
You're for banning him?
I think the line for me is nearer, and the conditions of his current release is that he can't preach and wants to go on the internet to preach. So you're breaking the law in doing it. That's the simple one.
Oh, you think he's breaking the law by even doing that?
In terms of his early release.
Ah, well, I mean, that's
effectively serving his sentence.
Well, that's a different question then, isn't it? Because then that's about legality. But if say he didn't have that restriction, would you be for banning? Because there are plenty of people like him making comments like him on Twitter. Would you support banning them?
So how much do we need to remove the criminality? Because would he have been found guilty and sent to prison for supporting ISIS? Would that still be there? If he'd never done anything legally wrong, then maybe I wouldn't.
Well, if you want me to push me on it, I mean, I don't believe in hate speech laws as a concept anyway. I think they should all be abolished, full stop. And I think the best way to challenge people like Chowdhury is to have him say what he wants, because they expose themselves for the idiots that they are.
But he also got in trouble for grooming people that went to fight the war in Syria.
Yes.
And he was directly responsible for that. He claimed to be, so that was his self-admitting.
Would you ban him from Twitter?
No, don't ban anybody. It's got to be open. If it's not open, then what's the point? What's the point of having Elon Musk say that, and then all of us getting excited about a free open-air speech area, and then having it cancelled because we don't agree with his policy?
Well, it was funny because when all these feminists started getting banned from Twitter, and the Taliban were thriving on Twitter, they were doing really well. So it was just such an odd... I mean, you must admit that the way they apply these laws is very uneven.
Yeah, I mean, and the argument that, as you said at the start, people say it's a private company that can do what they want, should very much be the response about Elon. Stop caring.
Right.
There's some people are so upset that they're tweeting that they're leaving Twitter, which is a very bizarre thing.
Also,
how you do that.
unlike all those feminist lesbians, the Taliban are not gluten-free. So
No, there is
I
that.
have time for them.
Scott Capurro supporting the Taliban there. We're going to move on now to another question from Twitter. This is from Emily. Emily on Twitter says, should all our police forces be adopting a back-to-basics approach? So I know what this is. This is about the Chief Constable, Stephen Watson, who was recently appointed at Great Manchester Police, and he's lifted the police out of special measures in just 18 months. It's going very, very well. And he was criticised at the start for being this anti-woke police officer. He said that the police are getting too bogged down in rainbow colours and all the rest, doing the Macarena and all the rest of it. And he said that actually, he's going to impose some, not just to avoid the ideological bent of many police forces today, but also to say that police officers should dress smartly, and sort of be spruced up and do the job properly and all the rest of it, be disciplined, be on time. It's working.
It is working. And the problem, I guess, with the police force in London, at least, is that its history with ethnic minority communities is not great.
No.
And they've tried to rebrand themselves over and over again. And maybe they've gone a bit too far.
Yes.
And lost their focus. Luckily, more police are on the streets again. And I think, I mean, from my perspective, our neighbourhood in East London feels safer.
But it's important, isn't it, that the police are politically neutral? Really important. And if they are seen to be supporting an ideology that is very highly contested, that's a problem.
Or not knowing how to respond to that ideology. I think that's part of the problem, too. They want to keep their relationship with all communities safe as possible.
Yes.
So that people will behave and will come forward with information. And they don't really know, I think they're not trained properly in how to deal with certain communities.
Right.
And that might be the next step.
What do you think about this, Steve? Because, I mean, looking at the stats on this, under this new Chief of Police, Watson, the average 999 answer times have been cut by over a minute, and arrests are up by 60%. I mean, that's huge.
Yeah, the second part makes sense, that if the order is a back-to-basics strategy, go out and try and find more criminals, you're going to get more arrests. The fact that the phone's been answered quicker and it's taking less, I'm not sure why. Were they being held on afterwards for a little "how was your experience" survey? I'm not sure what was happening.
Well, no, and it doesn't explain why that would be the case. But is it just that when you instill a kind of more disciplined approach, generally this filters down? I don't know.
Yeah, well, reading all the details, it starts to mirror the idea of, like, the Giuliani broken windows, that if you were saying to the police officers, just be a bit smarter, maybe there is something that follows through in the way you do your business.
The problem is the conviction rates are not good. That's part of the problem.
No, they're really bad. I think people are really resentful of the political gesturing of the police.
Yes.
You know, when they see the police sort of saying, if you say something offensive on Twitter, we're going to be knocking on your door, and you think, you know what? You never solve the crimes around here. Never, the knife crimes through the roof, and, you know, when people get their houses broken into, they don't often tell the police anymore because it never leads anywhere.
Yeah, my neighbours won't invite them over at all. And there's a family with an autistic kid that lives behind us, and they think the police might just make it worse if they
get so, I mean, really, their priorities. So maybe we need more people like this guy. Anyway, we shall see. We've got another question now from another viewer. This is by email. This is from George. And George says, would you leave a date if you did not agree with the other person's dietary requirements? I don't know. Yes, I know. You have an issue with vegans.
Bread is bread. Just eat it or shut up.
Well, this is actually about the French actor Renan how do you pronounce that? Pacheco. Well, he apparently, this is a story that I read this week, and it does seem a bit mad. He walked out of a restaurant. He's with a date. He doesn't say goodbye. He just storms off because of the way that his date ordered food. Because apparently she said she didn't want to eat gluten. And then apparently she also said she didn't want any alcohol, and he said that was the last straw, and he stormed out. Now, I've never heard of this guy, but apparently he's quite famous. That's a weird thing to do, isn't it?
It's weird to not stand there and say why you're leaving. What a great opportunity to point out, and I'll tell you what else is wrong with you. Enjoy the breakup, that's what I'd say. It does come across, and I hope this is not too offensive, as quite French to just leave without...
It's quite a French
just
thing
that kind of, and walk out, which I wish I'd do.
They're anarchists. They can't help themselves. But he ordered a bottle of wine to kind of smooth the moment when she said she didn't eat gluten. He tensed up. Can I make this better? And then when the wine came, she's like, oh, I don't do that either. Her name was Kimberly, which she already found offensive.
Yeah.
So I think it wasn't going well for
Well, I mean, when you say it like that, it does sound annoying.
Yeah.
You know, you've complained about the gluten in your food. You try and get a nice glass of wine. She's like, I can't have that either.
The best thing to do on a first date, go to a comedy show. You can really weed out the herd that way.
You can.
Because if people don't laugh the way you laugh, it's over before it starts.
Actually, that's true. If you don't have a shared sense of humour...
It'll never work,
It's
ever.
a good test.
Also, this is the best way of plugging tickets, isn't it? Are they available right now?
We've got one more question before we have to go to a break. This is from Twitter. Thanks for messaging in, Charlotte. Charlotte asks, should footballers be able to put political messages on their boots? OK, so Football Club Wrexham, owned by Ryan Reynolds and some other guy, banned striker Paul Mullin from wearing boots emblazoned with a political message. I think we've got the image there. So he posted boots. You can't quite see it because we've edited that out. He said, F the Tories on the boots, and the club said they couldn't do it. So what do you think about this?
Well, yeah, you can't.
You can't, can you?
I mean, it was cute. He's adorable, but he's behaving like a child, and you just can't.
No.
So just don't make it into that.
Yeah.
Just, I think, like this thing about the gay rights in Qatar, I think a lot of people going to watch the match just feel like, can we not bring all that into the game? Can we just have this beautiful game?
This idea that Tory voters don't like football and won't be there I mean, that's weird, isn't it?
No, of course, they're going to be there. I mean, everybody should be there who feels like they want to be there. To try not to exclude anyone, it's in a way just as bad as putting a message with the opposite message, on
Yeah, I mean, Steve, it's pretty clear-cut, this one, isn't it?
It is. I mean, the closest thing to a counter-argument would be you'd need some great eyesight to be able to be offended.
Well, that's true.
Like, what's that guy kicking the ball with? How dare you? But yeah, I mean, isn't that not technically a uniform? So the club gets to pick. Yeah, you just wear a uniform. Yeah. I mean, if that person wants to have trainers that say it and tweet it, then good luck to you.
So that's his freedom of speech. But if you're violating the uniform policy,
yeah, I'm strict on uniform.
Yeah, I know you are.
Everything else I'm lax, but uniform.
Well, look, after the break on Free Speech Nation, I'm going to be joined by the nurse who is taking the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust to court after she was accused of not being fit to work due to her supposedly prejudiced views. You won't want to miss that. See you in a minute.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move. If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and tune-in apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other paper review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
And the national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flock at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Welcome back Nation, with me, Andrew Doyle. I am absolutely delighted to welcome my next guest. This is a fascinating story. Amy, sorry, let me just say, we've had a recent case where a mental health nurse is taking the Tavistock and Portman NHS Trust to court. And this is a fascinating story. We have Amy Gallagher herself here today. And also, in addition to that, we have Carol, your surname, Carol Sherwood, who is a clinical psychologist who's going to be talking about a report that has come out as well. So, Carol and Amy, thanks for joining me. So, Amy, I'm going to come to you first. Yes. Can you tell me what happened to you? Because a lot of people will have heard of the Tavistock. Yes. We've talked a lot about the Tavistock here. You were training to be a nurse, and what happened?
So I am a nurse. I was training to become a psychotherapist at the Tavistock, and they sent this lecture around called Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time, which was...
Whiteness, a Problem for Our Time.
Which essentially... so I watched the lecture, and it was essentially critical race theory for an hour, and no debate, no discussion, and was saying some very racist things, using phrases like white ignorance, white people don't understand the world. And I responded to this quite mildly and just essentially said, I personally don't agree with these views, and we need to be aware that patients might not agree with these views either, and we need to be aware that there's different viewpoints.
Yes.
Which I thought was quite a fair response to something that was quite overtly racist and radical.
You just expressed a viewpoint that this ideology shouldn't be taught as uncontested fact in a training session.
Yes, that there are different views, that there is this thing called critical race theory, but there are people that disagree with it.
Yes, and how did they react to that?
So I essentially got pulled into a meeting with the course lead, and I was told that the course might not be right for me because of my views. My views were contrary to the Trust's anti-racist thinking. And I said, well, my view of not being racist is not judging a person by the colour of their skin, treating people equally, not being prejudiced. And they said that they see that as a discredited and outdated view at the Tavistock.
Wow.
Yes.
So, in other words, the dream of colour blindness by Martin Luther King, that's over. We can forget about that.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. And I said, you know, this lecture was putting forth the idea essentially that all white people are racist. Is that just the view of the lecturer? And I was told that that was the view of the Trust.
No, that's absolutely fascinating, because it's an
NHS Trust. Yes, yeah.
So, when you have the NHS peddling overtly ideological things, and not just that, forcing you to believe in order to graduate, is that right?
Essentially, yeah. So I made a complaint about what had been said, and then a few days after the complaint, I got a progress report sent to me telling me that they'd noticed, the progress board had noted that my views weren't in keeping with the Trust's anti-racist thinking.
Right.
So at this point, all I'd said is that I disagree with the idea that all white people are racist. That's all I'd said.
And there have been accusations leveled at you.
So there's been all sorts of things since. So they continued to push this ideology onto me, and I just said they continued to push the ideas of Robin DiAngelo, who wrote the book White Fragility, and I said that, you know, these ideas aren't evidence-based, and she's not a clinician. And in response to that, they raised a student conduct policy against me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah. And since then, one of the lecturers has contacted the Nursing Midwifery and Council and said that I'd caused race-based trauma.
Simply for registering your view on these subjects?
Yes, for just saying that. And I was actually asked what my view was, and I just said, well, I don't agree. I don't think this Robin DiAngelo, I don't like her ideas.
So their perception is that by challenging the ideals of someone like Robin DiAngelo or critical race theorists more generally, that makes you a racist?
Yes, essentially, and not fit to become a psychotherapist. They've not followed any of their policies or procedures, but they sent letters to me saying that if I continued to speak inappropriately about race, I would be suspended, I would be barred from entering the profession of psychotherapy. And then later on in the year, the course lead gave a speech to all the students saying that we were having our lectures on Zoom and we were going to meet in person, and she said she decided that it wouldn't be a good idea to meet with me in person because my hate speech could be better managed over Zoom. And she said hate speech is different from free speech, and because hate speech makes people feel bad, and I had made people feel bad by criticising the ideology, essentially.
I mean, this is shocking stuff. I mean, it really is. I'm going to bring in Carol Sherwood here because you're a clinical psychologist and you've recently been involved in a report into the area of clinical psychology and particularly training. So, you know, we've talked a lot on this show about the ways in which the kind of ideologies that Amy is talking about have captured all sorts of institutions. But it's really quite prominent here, isn't it? What have you found?
It is. What was really quite shocking, Andrew, was that
our freedom of information requests that we sent to all the UK clinical psychology courses. We had 21 positive responses, and what they all showed was that NHS Health Education England was imposing anti-racist policies on these courses. They're paying them substantial amounts of money to do this, and also to decolonise their curricula. And
what do they mean by that?
Basically, what they want to do, this is, in many ways, this is a very laudable aim, because they want to try and reach marginalised, as they call them, or people who are disadvantaged, ethnic minorities, and make sure that they can actually get access to NHS services.
Which is fine.
Which is a good thing, but it's the method that they're using. So essentially, they want to strip the curricula of anything that they believe is white and Eurocentric. Now, there's a real problem with this, because most of the established psychological base of knowledge is white and Eurocentric.
Well, but also that's not the significant factor of that. It's the actual knowledge in of itself, not the skin colour of the person who formulated it.
Exactly, Andrew. And this is the worry. And the real concern is that the evidence base is white and Eurocentric. What are we going to do in the future when these really well evidence-based treatments are removed from the curricula because the person was the wrong skin colour, and you have patients coming for help, and then being offered the kind of things that they're offering as an alternative of politicised things like liberation psychology, which completely rejects Western science. And my concern is, how on earth are we going to maintain the profession of clinical psychology, which is science-based? We are science practitioners.
Yes.
And what is happening from the FOIs that we've seen is that the courses are encouraging the students to become social justice activists. They are going to become agents of change. In other words, they bring about major social change in the values of society and so on. This is beyond the scope of a clinical psychologist.
Absolutely. Amy, can I come to you on this? Because we've seen, obviously, with the CAS report into the Tavistock Clinic, we have seen how practitioners who are working for the NHS have been employing ideological procedures, in the Tavistock's case, gender affirmative care, which is rooted in an ideological belief system, not in evidence. Now, surely, when it comes to the NHS, medical science, clinical psychology, all of these, it has to be evidence-led, doesn't it?
Yeah, of course it does. Yeah, I mean, that's what I've always been taught as a nurse, and always been taught as, you know, throughout my career. But the Tavistock, until you're in it, you can't explain what it's like. It's like a cult. It's like nothing I've ever experienced before. Each time I've just, you know, challenged the ideas, they just double down further and further and further. I mean, in response to my complaint, they said that they'd realised that the theory of whiteness as a system of power and privilege needs to be written into their policies more, not less. So that they were actually telling me that not only was I the problem, but I'd identified that they needed to do more of what they were doing.
So Carol, how can it be that this is an NHS body?
Yes, that's right.
So what I don't understand, I mean, Amy describes them as a cult, or there's a cult-like quality to that. But how can that exist within a funding system which comes from the government?
It's a very good question, which I can't answer.
Yeah.
And it's also, they're at odds with each other, because NHS England has quite recently come up with a specification, an alternative specification for people with gender identity problems, gender dysphoria. And so they're doing the right thing in that sense, but they're still pushing critical race theory and decolonisation onto the training courses.
Because people thought this was just about gender identity ideology, but they're also, as with all of these things, they've embraced all these other strands of this belief system.
That's right. It's like an umbrella. Critical social justice is the umbrella. But the other really concerning thing, and I know Amy's really worried about, is patient care. And it's politics coming into conflict with duty of care.
Yes.
You know, what happens, and we've got a lot of evidence from the States about this, that because these psychologists are becoming activists, they are beginning to refuse to see people with political views that they don't agree with. So they won't see Trump supporters, for example. You know, there's a lot of discomfort about people who voted Brexit in this country, for example.
Well, we had that woman on TV saying she wouldn't resuscitate a Tory voter.
Absolutely right.
So there is...
Yeah, this is an ethical problem. There's a real unethical sense about this. And they also teach people to think in ways which are completely unpsychological and untherapeutic.
Right.
So, for example, they'll teach black and white thinking. This is a particularly bad one. It is literally black and white thinking. And they will teach emotion emotional reasoning so that you have to trust your feelings to tell you what's true. Well, that just isn't the case.
It's the complete opposite of what I've been taught as a nurse. You're supposed to be non-judgmental. You're supposed to treat everyone equally. You're supposed to create a neutral space so that any patient sat in front of you, regardless of their views, can receive treatment from you, and you're supposed to not disclose your own views. This is, as Carol said, it's the complete opposite or inversion of what we're supposed to do. These ideologies encourage judgmental thinking. You're making a judgment about the person based on their immutable characteristics.
But the course that you were on, I mean, presumably we're dealing with very intelligent people who are part of this course. To what extent were other people on the course as nervous about this as you were? Or was anyone else expressing misgivings at all? No, they weren't. But why?
No,
are they just intimidated? What is it?
I think partly that they do align with some of those ideologies. I think that people maybe going into this profession are a bit woke, so to speak. But no, I think it is also people just wanting to get through the course and just pass and not, I just don't want to challenge this.
An easy life, in other words.
Yeah, because if you've got all people in positions of power who are judging you and marking you and the people that get you through the course, it's going to be very difficult to challenge them.
So why did you feel you had to?
Because I just can't accept these ideas. To me, it's just completely wrong. And
yes.
I wouldn't even want to be part of this profession if this is the direction it goes in. And I've seen what's happened with the cash review. Thank you. In terms of what happened with the CAS review and all of the stuff happening at the gender ideology, gender clinic, I couldn't live with myself because it's destroying patients' lives. And it's just destroying the profession completely.
But I can't help but thinking people haven't been speaking up enough.
Yes.
And this has been the problem.
Yeah.
So it's really important that you're doing
Yeah, and I
doing.
can't believe that the Tavistock, given all that they've gone through with, staff suing them, patients suing them,
yes.
all that's been in the media, that they still don't just seem to think there's an issue with this ideology. They think they're right.
So that's another interesting point, isn't it, Carol? So, for instance, with the CAS review, making pretty clear that this was not safe for children to simply affirm their feelings of gender dysphoria because the studies and evidence shows that most of those children will have that resolved naturally through puberty.
That's right.
But now you've got the Scottish government saying, well, we're going to ignore that. Because even though it's evidence-based, evidence-grounded, our ideology is more important to us. So this is like a religion now.
It is very much like a religion, and it is really concerning because I can't... The only way out that I can see, which is a way that we're trying to forge at the moment, particularly for clinical psychology, they are regulated by the Health and Care Professions Council. And so they have rules about not discriminating against patients and making sure that your practice is ethical and that you're fit to practice. And so we've taken it up with them and we've sent them the report, and they are looking at it. And what we hope is that perhaps they will be able to guide us on what we can do to try and bring this about, a change. Perhaps the Health Secretary we've written to as well can actually address the questions with NHS England. So we're hoping that those two bodies might be able to help us to bring about some change.
Well, I think it's incredibly important, and what you're both doing is fantastic work. So thanks for joining me today. Carol and Amy will be speaking at a Don't Divide Us subscriber meeting on Monday the 7th of November, and people can subscribe at their website, which is www.don'tdivideus.com. A spokesperson for the Tavistock and Portman NHS Foundation Trust has said, the matters raised by Ms Gallagher are the subject of ongoing litigation for which the Trust is currently preparing its defence. As this is a live legal matter, we are unable to comment on the allegations. As a Trust, we have made a public commitment to work to become an anti-racist organisation. So after the break on Free Speech Nation, has the German language become the latest victim of the drive for inclusivity? We'll be back soon to discuss.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panelists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Welcome back to Free Speech Nation with me, Andrew Doyle. Students learning German at Cambridge University are being encouraged to use gender-neutral and inclusive language when speaking to staff and their peers. But some say that this is butchering the German language and will just embarrass the non-native speakers. So joining me now is Oliver Baer from the German Language Association. Oliver, thanks for joining me today. Can you tell me, Oliver, what are your initial thoughts about these changes and why have they been put in place?
That's a little much. Okay. Our thought in the German Language Association about this is it makes us very cross because, well, you used the word butcher the language. Yeah, it's at least doing something to the tools that you shouldn't be doing. You shouldn't be blunting them. And this is one of the most important cultural achievements we've made over decades, over centuries, millennia. And now we are really hurting that tool. We're blunting it. One could argue, wouldn't it be worth the sacrifice if it will bring about justice, equal pay, etc., etc.? No, but I don't think so. We don't think it is worth the sacrifice because putting the burden of change on the language is very much like saving the climate by changing the color of our pens, you know?
Can I ask you, though, Oliver, I mean, when it comes to this, language does evolve all the time. It changes naturally. But this feels very much more like an imposition. It feels like people saying, we're going to forcibly get you to speak differently for ideological reasons. That's not quite the same as language evolving, is it?
Not at all. In fact, it's a great mistake to think that language evolves by itself. It is always people changing it. But the change happens not top down, but bottom up. It's what people speak every day. That is the everyday language. And you can try and influence from the top down as much as you like. That is restricted then to the elaborate educated.
Well, can I ask you about that? Because in this country, for instance, there's been lots of top-down efforts to have people use they and them and their as singular pronouns, but it just hasn't caught on with the general public, however much the media class like to pretend that it has. Is it the case in Germany? What is the context there? Are people using gender-neutral pronouns more often in common parlance?
Well, it's interesting that you're telling me about your situation, because in English you have a much easier problem to solve if you want to enforce gender-neutral language. And if it doesn't work in England, it won't definitely work in Germany either. People don't want it. Definite majorities of 70, 80% of the population do not want gender-neutral language. The problem now is who enforces it, who's trying to enforce it, and that's certain strata, certain milieus in society. But even there, even the Greens, who are known to be in favor of gender-neutral language, find that most of their voters do not support that either. Not even the women voting Greens.
What does this mean for the students, though, at Cambridge University? You know, these young people are being told to speak German in this particular way. If they then go to Germany and speak with these gender-neutral terms, won't they look like idiots?
Well, they might make fool of themselves, but one will feel sorry for them, because it's difficult enough for the Germans. How can we expect foreigners in our country to solve that riddle? No, I would advise not to even try. On the other hand, one might want to know what's going on and sort of know what to expect when you speak to people there who then speak woke language to you. But you don't have to know it. You don't have. I don't think so. I think it's a waste of time.
But is this just, you know, symptomatic of a broader problem within higher education, perhaps particularly in the UK, and particularly among the most elite universities? We keep hearing about Oxford and Cambridge in particular pushing these ideological measures onto students when they should just be teaching them the lessons, right?
Well, it's within the context of freedom of research and everything that universities should be standing for. And we find that the ideology is creeping in where people ought to be thinking rationally and working properly along scientific lines. Now, that's come to discredit. We've got leaders all over the world who do not believe in science anymore. I don't know what the hell they're doing.
Well, Oliver Bear, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Really appreciate it. Well, it's a fascinating topic, this one. I mean, Steve, doesn't it feel a little bit odd that, you know, in an English university, they're trying to tell the students who are learning German that they should speak it in this way that even Germans don't want?
Yeah, it feels like it's just becoming an academic practice rather than... Because languages aren't. As long as it's a live language used in a country, you need to know how it's used there. Exactly. Although, I mean, part of me just think, if we could get rid of... You know, when you try and learn French and you've got to learn whether a noun is masculine... you can... I don't care whether a table is masculine or feminine. That is something that definitely could be gendered.
That could go, couldn't it? You know, but although, really, I mean, the French would probably have a problem with that, wouldn't they? But they're difficult, aren't they?
As we learned earlier on today's show,
Yeah. Well, I mean, what do you think about this? Do you think that...
I was just in Berlin 2 weeks ago doing a comedy show for the Germans. And they're trying to rebrand themselves. But anyway, and they have to import their comedy for obvious reasons. But there are no gender-neutral nouns in German. There are none. So they have to change not just some, but the entire language.
So this isn't,
and they were talking about it while I was there.
So this isn't just the equivalent of, say, us trying to force people to say them and they.
No.
It's more like when people invent neo-pronouns here and say je and je.
Yes.
And that hasn't caught on with anyone. Everyone thinks you're insane if you say that.
No one knows what it means. It sounds like you're high. I think it's strange, too, because the Germans are very particular about their language. And if you know, if you go to Germany, you see all the television is dubbed with German. Nothing is in there's no words on the screen, you better speak German or you can't watch TV at all.
Right.
Because they really love their language. I mean, even cartoons, like The Simpsons, is dubbed into German. Because to them, their language is a real source of pride.
Yeah, but it feels like, Steve, that actually Cambridge University has bypassed all of that. They've bypassed the way that the German people behave with their language and what it means to them. They, apparently, as Scott said, there are some debates going on over there, but Cambridge University has sort of high-handedly said, no, we're going to solve this for you. The Germans have got it wrong. we know their language better than them.
Yeah. Or it's like they're taking it from being an actual real-life language to making it like, oh, we've studied this, and this is what you'll be studying. Although, to be fair, when people start going on about what a gerund is, like, you can analyse the English language enough to be like, that's not how we use it, mate.
No, I get that. But doesn't this feel... What I don't understand is, if you've got these activists, and let's call them woke activists or whatever, who are implementing this kind of stuff, can't they see that this is a form of linguistic colonialisation? I mean, isn't this just taking someone else's language and changing it because you think you know better? I mean, isn't that what the English did in Wales?
Well, surely you'd also understand that the use of learning a language would be blunted. One of the great things about it is you can go over there on holiday and look fancy. But if you're going to go over there and look really silly, why are you learning a language then?
If only Cambridge had told the Germans they were doing it wrong in 1935.
Right.
That would have solved some of this, because Cambridge was on the side of you-know-who at that time, right?
Is that right?
Oh, yeah, they liked it.
More people were than you thought.
Yeah,
not good. Anyway, it's time now for social
The boots were so
sensations.
shiny, though.
He's going to start going on about how
the boots.
nice the uniforms were. This is Social Sensations. It's the part of the show we devote to the weird and wonderful world of social media. We're going to start with Disney, because Disney have introduced their first plus-sized heroine, and if you don't know what that means, fat, basically, and it's caused a bit of a stir online. Now, the film is called Reflect and features Bianca, a young ballet dancer struggling with body dysmorphia.
Well, she's a fat ballet dancer, so she would, wouldn't she?
Thank you, Scott. Let's have a... No, but you know, look, I was a fat ballet dancer. I was as a kid, and then I did it too much and I got thin, and you know, that's the problem.
It's unfair for the mirrors. They have to be so much wider.
Yes.
No, look, why make her a ballet dancer? Oh, it's so painful to watch.
Yeah, why not? What would be more appropriate?
Just someone with a weight problem that's, mocked and ridiculed by her peers.
You don't have a problem with Disney addressing the issues of body dysmorphia, because that is a serious issue, and people are bullied for their weight. I was bullied for my weight.
I feel bloated right now. I know I'm not. Look at me, but I feel like I am. Pity me. Put me in a unitard. Let me dance around. I think what they should be doing is dealing with the subject in a slightly more realistic way, so that people can relate to it.
So look, again, Steve, I mean, I'm sure you're on board with the idea of children's films addressing issues like body dysmorphia, but that just looks silly, doesn't it? I mean, you can't do a changement when you're a size 24.
I've never tried, and let's be honest, I'm the biggest one here, so I'd win a fight or somehow. No, I think, in terms of body dysmorphia, the size of the eyes. Was that not
the eyes are completely out of
half the size of a face.
Yeah.
No, you're right. A film that addresses these issues, fair enough, and if you don't want to see it, don't. So, Scott, we don't have to go together.
All right. The thing is, shouldn't kids' films be about fun stuff? Like, coyotes running into a block of cement.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Health and safety, you can't do that.
I guess not. What happened to fun kids' films?
Yeah, not about issues.
Yeah.
Leave that to the adults. Adults like the issues, but children don't like issues.
They're still fun. There was no big issue behind cars, was there? He had a big enough engine.
The next in this film, she's going to get pregnant, and then it's all going to hit the fan, all of it. Right?
Well, that'll be the sequel. Anyway, we're going to move on now. We've got another one here. This is a Just Stop Oil. Back in the press again. Now, they've been dominating social media this week. They blocked a four-way junction in East London to get the government to stop issuing new oil and gas licences. And we actually had someone from GBNews went along to hear what they had to say.
And now at such a dangerous level, we are just a tiny, tiny fraction away from irreversible climate change.
I personally feel, and I think a lot of us do, that democracy is a sham, and the politicians are in bed with corporations.
Oh, that's easy. That's because our planet is burning, and we're in the road to try to sound the alarm.
Well, at least they're not chucking soup at art, which is what they've been doing. Look, it's interesting watching these. I saw a video of some confrontations between protesters who glued themselves to the roads, and some people trying to get to work, and they're screaming at them, like, why are these posh middle-class people ruining my life? I've got bills to pay.
Yeah. And the last guy there looked too happy about, the world's burning. Yeah, we're all going to die. Wow, are you okay? No, it's entirely possible to support a cause, but to hate the method. So even if you like the idea, even if you are all about, protecting the planet, you don't have to like the stupid way of making everyone else's life worse. The problem is that it's not a good campaign. There's no link between the cause and the effect, but it gets people talking about it.
No, but this is the thing. So they keep talking about how what they're doing is trying to get attention. So they'll throw soup at Van Gogh sunflowers because suddenly we're all talking about it, and we are.
Yeah.
But what it doesn't do is generate a support for their cause. It actually does the opposite. And in fact, the more we talk about it, the less popular they become.
I think it does generate support, though. Maybe not between us for them.
I haven't seen much evidence of that.
But I think there are people who want to see it in press, in the media, on the front page, and there they are. And how else are they going to gain any support anyway? They have tried everything else. And this is obviously those gentlemen, gluing themselves to the road. This is their last-ditch effort.
Yeah, but look, you would be annoyed. If someone was gluing themselves to the front of a comedy club so you couldn't get in and work, you would have something to say about it.
No, I'd set them on fire, but I understand their grief. I had people protesting my shows in Edinburgh saying, we're going to show up with placards. I wish they would have. It would have sold me out. I mean, I think what everyone's trying to do is gain the attention of social media, so everyone's desperate. Like one of your guests said earlier, it goes by so quickly, so fast. You've got to do something snappy.
Have you seen the way that the French police deal with it? They just rip their hands off the floor, even though they've glued them there. It's like, well, I don't approve of that, but actually, kind of, maybe I do. I don't know. I don't know, because it's all...
It's like taking a plaster off. I mean, sometimes it's just better to do it really fast. You won't do it again.
I think we all agree, though, that climate change is a problem. I mean, London was summery this weekend, which is scary. It should be freezing, and it's not. We're all terrified about what's going to happen next, but none of us know what to do.
But it's what Steve says. It's not about the cause necessarily. If the method is alienating people and annoying people, it's not. Anyway, who knows? We've got another final clip now. This is Fiona the hippo at Cincinnati Zoo. Received over 800,000 views on Twitter for having her annual Halloween-themed treat. And apparently she can do ballet as well. What do you think about that?
She did a better job than these.
Yeah. I know. We've got some pumpkins here which aren't particularly well done. I do apologise for whoever it is.
A little frontal brain damage. Yeah, a little violent.
I mean, that's just a cute video of a hippo, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
There's very little more to say.
Or maybe a future ballet dancer in a Disney film.
Exactly.
Maybe.
We can't have a debate about it, though, can we?
No.
Well, I think it's wrong.
Yeah. That's helpful. How dare they?
They're overfeeding that hippo. That hippo is too hippo-ish.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Hippo's apparently very dangerous.
Really?
Apparently. Anyway, next we're going to move on to the Unfiltered Dilemmas. This is the part of the show where people send in their problems and we attempt to solve them. I don't know why. We never really come up with good answers.
Our lives are disaster themselves.
I know, we are not people to emulate, believe you me. And I know Scott, outside of this, some dark things going on in his life. Now, this one comes from Michael. Michael says, my friend finds a colleague bossy, incompetent and lazy. She's considering trying to get her sacked. However, she is unsure if her perception is based in reality or if it is just because she considers her, and I quote, a fat, ugly something. Should my friend continue with her plan or give this woman a chance? Oh, Scott, that's one for you.
Yeah. I'm sorry, what was her plan? That quote was so shocking.
It's really shocking, isn't it?
Yeah.
She sounds like she's out of control.
Yeah.
Like, that's a bit...
She wants her friend to sort of be less bossy.
She wants to get this woman fired
right.
for being bossy, but you can't do that. I mean, I work with bossy people. They're
I mean, sometimes you want bossy people around.
Because they get stuff done.
They do, yeah.
You know?
Like my friends who are my neighbors, they're a gay couple, these two women, and they're so bossy. But those kids are up by 8 a.m. with their heads shaved, on the motorcycle on the way to school. I really admire that.
What do you think, Steve?
It looked like, actually, we have no evidence that this person is lazy or any of this, but there's a little bit of fat prejudice happening here.
Yeah.
This person thinks they're fat, therefore they must be lazy. So I say, fire yourself.
Yeah.
Fire yourself. That's our advice. Our second dilemma now from Edward. Edward says, I'm currently in bed... Hold a minute. We had this one last week. Right, we're going to have to move on. We're going to have to move on to another...
It's a long time
We're going to have to go to
Maybe he's still in bed.
Maybe he's still in bed.
Alarming.
Maybe.
Edward, get up!
Get that bossy woman involved. She'd sort it out.
Well, which bossy woman? Oh, the one who wants to have the other woman fired?
The large one.
Okay. Well, look, we don't have any more. I don't think... Oh, we have one more, apparently. Okay. Here we go. So this is someone called Kitty. Why do cat food manufacturers encapsulate their sachets in brain-defyingly thick cardboard? My poor fur babies have to hungrily wait while I get out my hammer to crack open the triple-layered cardboard exteriors. What on earth is going on?
Thank you, Kitty. Thank you. Finally,
Is that real?
someone.
Is that a real
This
thing?
is an issue I deal with all the time. You go to get packaging, you can't open it. You start to feel like, how old and feeble am I that I can't even open this little sachet?
Is this a real conversation we're having? I
It's
can't believe this.
horrifying.
So people have you come across this thing?
Well, I've got 2 cats, and got to be honest, I just ripped the top off that box.
Exactly.
The cats, they look at me adoringly, going, "Oh, he can provide us with food."
Yeah, but you're a beast.
Oh, I'm a beast.
And you've cut it earlier with scissors just to impress them.
It helps.
Yeah.
Well,
Gotta
look,
perforate.
on this bizarre note, I've got to say thank you for joining us for Free Speech Nation. This was the week when Trevor Noah concocted an imaginary backlash against Rishi Sunak, Ray Fiennes became the latest to stand up for JK Rowling, and Elon Musk became the king of Twitter. You're going to be joining me next week, of course, and if you want to join our audience, you can do that as well. Just go to SRO Audiences. See you next week, though.
To tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking mostly dry with sunny spells, but it will turn wet and windy later. Let's take a look at the details. Across northern Scotland, it's a dry start to the day, but it will cloud over with outbreaks of rain arriving from the west. The wind will also become gusty. Overcast with outbreaks of rain spreading east across Northern Ireland, becoming heavy and persistent during the morning, rather windy, particularly early in the day. Much of northern England will start the day fine with some mist and murk over high ground and a few showers in the west. Cloudy with a few brighter spells across Wales, and the cloud thick enough to give some outbreaks of rain and drizzle during the morning, remaining mild for the time of year. The East Midlands will start the day dry with some decent breaks in the cloud. It will become fairly breezy during the morning, but nevertheless it will feel pleasant in the sunshine. It's a similarly bright picture across much of East Anglia, with mostly dry conditions persisting for much of the day. Temperatures reaching into the mid to high teens later on. A mild start across southern England with temperatures above the daytime average for late October. Again, it will be mostly dry with sunny spells, but cloudier in the west. A band of cloud and rain will edge in from the west, reaching much of Northern Ireland and western Scotland by the afternoon. And that is how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio,
And online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel.
Britain's
news channel. Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes.